The Worst Equestrian Necromancer, Chapter 12, An Odd Trip Home. The ruins of the lost city of flames were beautiful. The way the sunlight reflected on the orange walls made the city resemble a simmering fire, while magical light softly illuminated anywhere the sunlight didn't reach. Black Sun, long since used to the sight, was ignoring this as he sensed the few skeletal workers responsible for keeping the place livable. He'd still been maintaining his old residence, even though he'd been spending most of his time in Ponyville recently. He turned to look at the reason for his new favorite town in Equestria. Twilight was staring wide-eyed at what once was the city square. Sending a quick mental order for his minions to hide, he adjusted his hat, smiled, and began talking to Twilight. "So, Miss Sparkle, shall we retreat to my living room? I'm sure that we can look at some of my older texts and find the potential hiding places of an evil necromancer." She turned to Black Sun with an annoyed frown.
"I've told you to stop calling me that, son. Just call me Twilight."
She paused, looking over the city.
"But yeah, that would be nice."
They began slowly moving through the city, stopping frequently for Twilight to marvel at the architecture. Black Sun was overjoyed by this. It was always a delight to find ponies that shared his love of ancient ruins, even if she loved it more for the history than the challenge. Twilight continued staring at the buildings in awe as they continued through the streets, but flinched back when she saw a massive pony skull embossed on a building.
Son? Didn't you say that these were necromantic ruins?"
Black Sun paused his quiet trot. "Well, yeah." Twilight visibly paled, but then he waved his hoof. "This is a pretty calm area, though, which is why I set up a safe house here. If you see a skeleton near here, just leave it alone. These ones aren't exactly dangerous." That didn't seem to reassure Twilight much, but she nodded her assent as they continued to move through the city center. When they reached it, Twilight shook off her fear in order to properly stare in awe. The large tower dominating the central plaza was plated with brilliantly polished bronze and surrounded by magical lights positioned to give it the illusion of a raging inferno.
"Is that your house?"
Black Sun let out a laugh and pointed to a two-story building positioned near the tower. "Oh, nah. Living in the big towers was always Dad's thing. I live in there." Twilight tilted her head quizzically at Black Sun as he began to move to his house.
"Your dad lives in giant towers?"
Black Sun paused briefly, then nodded. "Yeah, Dad likes to research old ruins and he sets up shop in the biggest tower that he could find. Personally, I think he does it as a sort of long-running joke. Just don't mention that to anyone, he gets defensive about his image." Twilight continued to stare in confusion for a few moments, before Black Sun shrugged it off. "But enough about him, let's get in my nice cozy house." He walked up and opened the door while turning to look at Twilight. "It's easier to avoid stairs or a long flight whenever I want to check my private stuff. I've always disagreed with Dad on his choices of homes." He walked through the wide door with Twilight, following quickly behind him. However, they both paused at the sight of a periwinkle unicorn browsing through his bookcase. Trixie Lulumoon didn't even notice their entrance as she lazily grabbed the next book from the shelf with her magic. As she scanned through the first few pages, she began to mutter to herself.
"Trixie really needs to talk to Black Sun about his sorting system. While his father may like this strange numbering system, it vexes poor Trixie. Surely he must have that old book on the flutter ponies or this Dream Valley nonsense."
Black Sun managed to recover his voice. "Trixie, you're supposed to be in Canterlot!" Twilight recovered right after that.
"Trixie, what are you doing here?"
Trixie wasn't particularly startled by the sudden appearance of Twilight and Black Sun. She calmly returned the book to the shelf and climbed onto a slightly ratty couch with a skeleton design on it.
"Yes, the concert was wonderful. Your father bemoans the fact that he was no longer capable of crying the entire trip home. But Trixie is here because he sent her on another job. Apparently Trixie needs to find the former home of the flutter ponies in Dream Valley. He gave Trixie the necessary survival tools, but mentioned that you currently had all the Dream Valley books. We didn't think that you'd be here since we heard that you were taking a..."
Here she paused and glanced at Twilight for a moment.
"friend somewhere."
Black Sun stared at her for a moment before sighing. Yeah, Twilight and I were going to look through some spots I'd mapped out to try and guess where whoever summoned that old pirate ship in Ponyville came from. We were going to use my old charts and books to narrow it down." Trixie glanced at Twilight, who appeared to have categorized everything that had just been said and found it wanting.
"Wait a second.
Twilight pointed at Trixie.
Are you saying that Trixie, the showmare that tried to upstage every pony in Ponyville, works for your mysterious father, who you're always super cagey about?"
Black Sun flinched at that. "Not exactly works for, she's kind of his apprentice." He turned to face Trixie. "And the flutter pony stuff is on the second floor in my study. It should be near the sketch of what I think Dream Valley looks like now. You have that Wendigo charm, right?" Trixie nodded.
"Yes, and your father granted Trixie access to his personal store of shielding cloaks." Trixie should return in a few months, hopefully with some news.
Twilight jumped back into the conversation.
I need some answers here. How was Trixie, the mare who was a one-trick pony, the apprentice of an extremely accomplished explorer who somehow remains hidden?
She turned on Black Sun.
And how come she can just barge into your home whenever the hay she feels like?
Black Sun paused at that. He had never thought it weird when someone just wandered into his home. Granted, that might just be due to his upbringing. He tended to not worry about the occasional friend showing up unannounced when you lived with someone that routinely has heroes invade his residence. Regardless, he did shrink under her glare. Well, we're kind of friends, and in our line of work, if you really need a book, we normally just grab it from whoever has it and leave a note. We can get a hold of each other easily enough if it's an issue. Twilight stared at the flinching pony before her and huffed at him in annoyance.
Well, that still doesn't explain how Trixie got an apprenticeship to your father.
Trixie giggled at this.
Why, Trixie summoned him, of course. How else could one hope to catch the attention of such an accomplished mage?
Twilight froze as she heard the soft clop of hoof on face from Black Sun. Why did you say that, Trixie? Now I'm gonna have to deal with it. Trixie smiled as her horn began to glow softly.
And that doesn't sound like Trixie's problem.
With a soft pop, she teleported away, leaving Black Sun to deal with the mess that she made. He sighed and used a wing to massage his head. Sorry about that, Twi. Trixie's calmed down since we first met her, but she still gets all great and pout. He was cut off by Twilight, who had started thinking out loud as she paced back and forth.
How could she summon a mage? Summons spells don't work on ponies. I mean, she could have used a thaumaturgy detector, maybe a message spell.
She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't notice the skeletal velociraptor poking his head around the corner from the kitchen. Upon seeing Black Sun, it tilted its head. Black Sun raised the hoof to his muzzle, trying to silence its inevitable greeting. Though it didn't work. His bird let out a chirp at its master. Black Sun dived into the kitchen, tackling his pet out of sight. He heard Twilight from outside of his room.
Wait, what was that?
Black Sun began rubbing the velociraptor on its bony spine. Nothing, just grabbing some drinks. Soda sound good? I have some water too, if that's more your speed. There was a pause before a small sigh came from the other room, then the soft clops of Twilight walking towards him. He began to panic as he pushed the velociraptor towards the pantry. It looked at him, confused, as he shoved it inside and closed the door. Sorry, Tooth, gotta keep you hidden. I'll play with you in a bit. With that done, he rushed to the fridge and opened it. With a relieved sigh, he saw that he actually had some soda, and as a bonus, there was also some leftover cider from Sweet Apple Acres. He should really thank Applejack for that. He turned to see an approaching Twilight. Hey, I have some cider, if you'd like that instead. Twilight nodded.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, was Trixie serious when she said that she summoned your dad?
Black Sun thought furiously as he began passing a bottle of cider over to Twilight. Easy answer, say no, and then come up with a convincing lie. Say literally anything but the truth and things would be fine. Yeah, Dad was impressed for days by the circle that she used. With that, Black Sun's plans evaporated like dust in the wind. Ah, crap. Black Sun collapsed in a chair while Twilight stared at him. At least today couldn't get any worse. Well, that was true for a few seconds before Tooth broke down the pantry door and jumped on Black Sun with a happy chirp, nuzzling his face as Twilight stared at it in abject horror. After struggling to push Tooth off of himself, Black Sun let out a sheepish chuckle. I can explain? Meanwhile, in Rygar's lair, Rygar had just finished talking with Celestia and was happily playing in his alchemy lab. The fact that he had accidentally dissolved his arm was just proof that he still had much more forbidden knowledge to obtain. He continued humming as he mixed ingredients into a beaker until the scream broke his concentration, causing him to splatter acid all over his skull. As it began melting, he let out a chuckle. Oh, so the plan didn't work. Well, Rygar told him so. That whole plan crumbled down so fast. It'll be a mystery whether or not they'll recover from that. Anywho, let's get on to our friendly donators. Top donators are 630, J10Man, Darkside, Only One Thing, Dash of Evergreen, and Ceru Orion. Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rolan, Stu Hex, Swordbrother and Mordred, Omicron Lyrae, Will, Chris Twinkie, Hadzaza, Riot Soul, Iron Sky, Badass Waffle, and many more fantastic people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.